Hi, welcome to the Israel First television program with myself, Martin Blackham, with my wife, Nathalie Blackham, coming to you from our studios in Jerusalem. We're so excited to be with the viewers this week, aren't we, Nathalie? It's a miracle we can be with you, through the YouTube television and through different television stations. You can get this program. We're bringing you news as accurately as we can from Israel at this time. Looking at news resources, we know that the media isn't saying everything, isn't it, Nathalie? That you're not getting everything, but we'll try and give you the background to stories and what's happening. Now, the story that's really affected and been in the news here in Israel is the situation which has happened outside of the land, actually, but has affected the Jewish communities, the story in Florida. And the Israeli army has been sent to Florida. It's a rescue team, search and rescue team, to assist with the tower which has collapsed and the rescue efforts. The IDF Home Front Command delegation has flown to Miami. Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, remember he's the new Prime Minister now, it used to be Benjamin Netanyahu, has spoken to Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and offered help. The Israeli Defense Forces sent the search and rescue team to assist with rescue efforts following the Surfside residential building collapse that's left at least 11 people dead and nearly 150 still missing. It's really a big catastrophe. The team of the Home Front Command soldiers headed to Florida following a series of talks over the weekend between Israeli officials and officials in Miami. The Defense Ministry said in a statement on Saturday night, Israel is often one of the first countries to send humanitarian aid delegations to countries hit by disasters. Defense Minister Benny Gantz said the move was approved in coordination with the Foreign Ministry. As with any national mission, the IDF and the defense establishment are ready to respond, act and assist. Every effort will be made to assist saving lives, supporting the Jewish community and our friend the United States, Gantz said. Foreign Minister Yair Lapid said that the sending of the delegation demonstrated the bond of friendship between the United States and Israel. Many of the 150 people still missing in the collapse are believed to be members of the American Jewish community. The mission of the delegation is to assist in the life-changing saving efforts by mapping the challenges at the site of the destruction, assisting the Jewish community and supporting the local rescue forces, said the IDF spokesperson in a statement. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke to the Florida governor, as I said, and conveyed condolences on behalf of the Israeli... Naftali Bennett spoke to the Florida governor, Ron DeSantis, and conveyed condolences over the disaster on behalf of the Israeli public and said that Israel would assist the American authorities in any way it could. Bennett told DeSantis that Israelis were praying for the well-being of the injured and said he instructed all Israeli government agencies to render whatever assistance was requested. Foreign Minister Yair Lapid also expressed solidarity with the United States, saying that Israel has no greater friend than the United States. In such difficult moments, we stand with our American friends and the Jewish community in Florida. And a lot of our viewers may not be aware of this. You might be watching today and you're not aware of the connection between America and Israel. But because so many Jewish people went to live in the United States, there are various communities, New York, of course, being the most famous, but there's also a lot of Jewish people who live in Florida and who connect with Israel. And there are a lot of people here. I mean, we have friends who have lived in Florida, Jewish friends. So it's the Jewish community is very connected to Israel, and so this disaster affected a lot of people here.
Families, yeah.
Yeah. So it's really a situation where Israel wants to help, and as I mentioned before, the Israel is one of the countries to send its search and rescue teams. Nepal was probably one of the most famous, but a lot of the disasters that happen in the world, Israel sends its search and rescue squad, and
also they have special teams for trauma, so they know how to speak with the people, and they take a trauma team with them, and they are in Miami, so it's important.
And so the United States is very connected with Israel and vice versa. Now, one of the important things you need to know is that embassies are being set up in Jerusalem, and Honduras has become the fourth country to open an embassy in Jerusalem after the United States, Guatemala and Kosovo. Israel's new Prime Minister Bennett thanked Honduras Prime Minister Hernandez for having done a brave and justified deed for the state of Israel. The Jewish people have a long memory, and you will be written in the pages of history as someone who took a courageous action and the right action for the state of Israel. Thank you, said Bennett. Honduras officially moved its embassy in Jerusalem to Jerusalem on Thursday in the presence of Prime Minister Naftali Bennett and visiting Honduran President Juan Orlando Hernandez. This was not this Thursday, but previous Thursday. Mr. President, you are a true friend of Israel, Bennett told Hernandez shortly before the inauguration ceremony at the Technological Park in the Malha neighborhood of Jerusalem. The Jewish people have a long memory, and you will be recorded in the pages of history as having done a brave and justified deed for the state of Israel. Why? The question is, why is it so important for a country to have its embassy in Jerusalem? It's because Jerusalem is the sacred capital of the Jewish people. It's because Jerusalem is the international capital, and it's the center. We've talked about this before, the center of the world. So very, very important that a country is recognizing that.
That's it, what you are saying, that is the capital of Israel. Also in the redemption and in the final days, we will see that it will become the capital of the world because of the Torah will come out of Jerusalem. So
and Hernandez went on, the president from Guatemala, I believe it was. Let me just check. Honduras, sorry. From Honduras said, "We hope to continue building the solid relationship between our two countries," Hernandez tweeted after the event, referring to Jerusalem as the eternal capital of Israel, which is what we're just talking about. Hernandez noted that he first visited Israel 30 years ago to take part in a leadership development program run by Mashav, or the Agency for International Development Cooperation, which he called a life-changing experience. He also pointed out that he took office in 2014. Honduras became one of the two countries in Latin America and one of the 5 in the world that most often abstains from resolutions that Israel opposes. Bennett thanked him for his international backing of Israel. "Under your leadership, Honduras consistently stands by Israel in international institutions when it's not always popular, and sometimes it also involves paying a price," the Prime Minister told Hernandez. "This is a testimony to our friendship, your willingness to take action, and I want to thank you and the public in Honduras for this support." Earlier Thursday, Israel signed a series of cooperation agreements with Honduras on agriculture, health, education and innovation, which is another thing Israel is doing. We have talked about this before and shared in a number of programs about Israeli help to many countries across the world with agriculture and in technology. And it's another thing, a very important thing that's happening now. Hernandez visited both the Western Wall and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem on Thursday. He also met President Reuven Rivlin. Who, by the way, we just had a change of president. We now have a new president coming in. I have no doubt that under your leadership, our relations and the cooperation between us and Israel will deepen. I thank you for your friendship and for the people of Honduras standing with Israel. So very important, to stand with Israel, to publicly make a stand is a blessing. And, it says that the Bible says those who bless Israel will be blessed. Unfortunately, we're still having terror in Israel. Just quickly have a look at this story. It says attempted terror attack near Yitzhar. This is a Jewish community on Friday. Knife-wielding Palestinian Arab terrorists attempted to carry out a stabbing attack at Mitzpe Yitzhar in Samaria Friday afternoon. The security coordinator shot the attacker in the lower body and neutralized him. No Israelis, fortunately, were injured. And this is happening, this is happening quite regularly when, that terror attacks, Natalie, are being prevented from happening. We don't often get to hear about that because it's only when something sadly happens that you hear about it. But there are, we've had
many
things even in our community in where we're doing the filming today. There have been attempted terror attacks. The Israeli army persons unit said a suspect was identified by the IDF lookouts a short time ago as he approached the community of Yitzhar in the area of Samaria. Yitzhar's military security coordinator arrived at the scene and identified the knife-wielding suspect. In response, the military security coordinator began a suspicious arrest procedure that included firing at his lower body. The IDF soldiers arrived at the scene. There were no casualties to our forces. Yossi Dagan, who's the head of the regional Samaria Council, spoke with Yitzhar military security coordinator who captured the terrorist and praised him for his swift and determined action. A murderous attack was prevented. This is how one must act in the face of terrorism. I strengthened the residents of Yitzhar and the IDF soldiers and all the residents of the state of Israel. We will defeat terrorism together with unity and with determination. And it's one of the things that, happens regularly and we have to be aware of. And, security is something very important to us. Now, Natalie, have you got some things you going to share?
Speaking about terrorism and all of that, I was reading a book which is called War and Peace from Rabbi Cook. It's a Cook. And he was the first rabbi, the major one.
Senior rabbi?
Yes. He was the major rabbi when Israel was established in 1948. And he was an amazing man. And he was very inclusive. So he knew that, again, redemption, he speaks also a lot about the redemption, that redemption is for the world. So it's not just for the Jewish people, and we're all included. So it's very important because inclusion is very important, okay? So he's speaking, this book is like peace, war and peace. And he's speaking about God is a man of war. It's called Ish Milchama, which is very interesting because Ish is a man. He's not a god of war. He's a man of war, which is very interesting because he wants to establish his kingdom. We spoke about that so many times. He wants to establish his kingdom here on earth. And so he has to fight evil. And we are fighting evil with him. But he is behind the scene all the time, okay? So you find this name, Ish Milchama, this man of war, is in Exodus 15, and I think it's verse 3, okay? Very important. And so he was speaking about that, and it's a new book that a friend of mine say, oh, you should read it because it's really speaking about the time of redemption where we are at now. And so I started to read it, and it's very, very interesting because when I read the book of Eliezer ben the story, the history of Eliezer ben Yehuda, I read this book 3-4 times, and do you remember? It's like all going into pieces now. It's called The Tongue of the Prophets, and from I can't remember his name. Do you remember the name of the man?
No,
who was,
sorry.
He was a journalist, and he wrote about Eliezer ben Yehuda. And The Tongue of the Prophet. You can find it on Amazon. You can find it in different websites. Okay, very important book because it's like the story of Eliezer ben Yehuda, but at the same time it's the story of Israel. And when I read it few times, because there is a lot of information, a lot of it's like history. And when I read it, I think it was the third time. Suddenly, ding, something went into my head saying, and I never understood that before, the history of the world depends on the history of Israel. And I didn't know that. And this Rav is exactly saying that. So I'm going to read you the summary that what he said from chapter 1. And it's one of the things that he said. He said, when there is a great war in the world, the power of Mashiach, of the Messiah, awaken. Okay? So when we had the World War I and World War II, it was like the footstep already of Mashiach. There was something happening for the world and for Israel. And we'll speak a bit more about that later on. And so he speak about that, funny enough. Okay, so we might start to speak about it right now, because he speak exactly about it right now in the book. When you had the World War One, and when you think, because I remember learning about all this war at school, you learn facts, you learn things, but you don't learn the behind, why it happens. And so when I was reading this book, The Tongue of the Prophet, from Eliezer ben Yehuda, from his life, suddenly I realized that the First World War happened because God was starting to push the world into the redemption for Israel. And at that time in Israel, there was the Ottoman Empire. Okay, and obviously the Jewish people who were in the Galut, who was like all exiled, they couldn't go and fight them. It was like impossible. They didn't have an army. They had no, they were like all dispersed all around the world. So what happened with this big war? The Ottoman Empire went into the side of the German. And so the German was defeated during the World War I. And so because of that, the Ottoman Empire was totally dismantled, and not really with because of the war in Europe, but suddenly thing was happening here in Israel. Meanwhile, in England, there was Christians who are really praying and for the redemption also of Israel, that things will happen in Israel, and there was the Balfour Declaration, which was just after the Second World War. So you see, the First World War, sorry. So you see, you had to have this war to defeat the Ottoman Empire, and then the English people came in the land, because it was no way that the Israelis could come, the Jewish people could come straight away, okay? Then you have, but, in the midst of that, there was 2 million people who died in the First World War. We'll speak about that a bit more after. Now, Second World War, you had, obviously, the Holocaust. We know that it was like terrible in Europe. And at that time, we lost 75 million, more or less, okay, is the official number they are giving. But after this war, the State of Israel was declared. Okay, so you have to understand the history of the world depends on the history of Israel, because God is a man of war, and he's like he has his agenda. He knows, like, Zion, Israel is going to be the middle of the world, and Torah will come from that, and peace will come from that. Okay, God is not a man of war for making war. He's a man of war for destroying evil. Okay, this is very important to know. He does not want to destroy people. Now, it's the evil one who makes that people are dying. But God loves us so much, and we really need to know these things. It's like he loves us so much, so much, so much. He treasures us, but the evil one hates us because he's jealous of us, okay? So this is very important to know. And so, yeah, and one of the things which is very difficult to understand, but again, when I was thinking all these months with all what's happening now, and also during the war, I realized, and he speaks, this Rav Kook speak about it, said the death of the righteous bring atonement to the nations. So there is something, is like a seed. When we put a seed in the ground, the seed has to die for the power of resurrection of the seed to come out and to bring fruits. So it's the same, don't ask me, is how it works. And it's like, so is what happened for the First World War, is what happened for the Second World War, and now we are in a Third World War, okay, with all that's happening around the world. And so we are going through this process, which is very difficult, but we have to see that the focus is that we are going to see evil defeated more and more, and that we are going to see the redemption of Israel and of the world now coming into places. So we really need to focus on our God. We need to know, and it's almost a week ago, I was praying and God was showing me, saying, okay, you need to focus on me. Don't look all around at all the things that are happening, because there is things who are frightening. There is things very disturbing. Like for the vaccine, it's so hard to say to people, this is not right. And I think God is making every one of us making their own decision. And we need to connect, every one of us, with our Creator and to lock our eyes with Him. And He was reminding me when I had our third child, obviously it's painful when, it's the time of the active labor and the baby is coming. But all these contractions are very important. For the baby, there is still fluid in the lungs and it needs to be cleaned. So the squeezing of the baby through the mother, through the birth canal, is very important for the health of the baby. And it's part of the process. It's part of the good process. It's hard. And we are doing the same right now. We are going through a hard process, but it's a healthy process for the baby to be healthy after. Like a seed who died, and there is this power, and there is the power of life who is there, okay? It's painful, but there is the power of redemption who is there, and it will come. And like, when, for me to have strength, I had to lock my eyes with the midwife, because I didn't have strength enough in me, and I was taking strength from her. Like, she was looking at me, and she didn't stop looking at me because she knew that I was taking strength from her. So we need to do the same with God. We look at Him, our Creator. We lock our eyes with Him, and when we are weak, we look at Him and say, you have the strength for me to go through, and the family to go through, and like our friends to go through. But everyone is like our life individually. We are all coming in front of the throne of God, and we are all like, it's a special relationship, us and Him, and it's like we love our loved one and we want the best for them. But it's us, and it's like a very individual time.
Yeah.
But at the same time, is something happening in all the world.
And you can be involved in this. You might not be able to visit Israel at the moment, but you can certainly be involved by helping us, by standing with us. Financially, you can get involved with us, and you can go to our donate page on the website. That really helps us. We need your standing with us. We need your strength. And you can write to us. You can email us at our email address, which is info@israelfirst.org. And also you can contact us, the webpage, and tell us what's happening where you are, and also tell us that you're standing with us, and that'd be great. Well, if you remember, we've been looking very briefly at the book of Enoch. The reason being is that Jesus said, as in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. And we needed to look at what happened in the days of Noah. And to look at that, we had to look at this book which isn't in the Bible, but it's referred to by many believers.
It's written a few times in the New Testament.
Mm-hmm. And we'll look at that as well. You've jumped the gun, because I'm just about to do that, if we have time. The book of Enoch, which we are looking at, I have briefly looked at it, but it's worthy of being, looked at in detail from the beginning. Now, first of all, nearly all the church fathers, Nathalie, were aware of the book of Enoch. So it's not something which is unknown or strange. It is something which was very much known by the first church fathers. The book of, as Nathalie was just saying, the book of Enoch is referred to in the New Testament, which is very important for us. In 2 Peter 2:4-5, it says, "For if God did not spare angels when they sinned, but sent them to hell, putting them in chains of darkness to be held for judgment, if he did not spare the ancient world when he brought the flood on its ungodly people, but protected Noah, a preacher of righteousness, and 7 others." And in Jude 6:6 it says, and the angels who did not keep their positions of authority, but abandoned their proper dwelling. And this is all down to the angels not staying in their right place. God had assigned them a place, and they didn't stay there, but they abandoned their correct place. And really, this is all the problems can be summed up in that, really. Everybody is not doing what they should be doing, not staying in the place they should be, and doing things they shouldn't be doing, and being in places they shouldn't be. He's kept them in darkness, bound with everlasting chains for judgment on the great day. And there were the discoveries of the texts. I've mentioned this before in the Qumran caves. There's a lot of discoveries that were made in Qumran from the Bible, and the book of Enoch was also discovered there, which is very important for you to know. Now, chapter 1 to 2, and we'll work through it in the time limit that we have. This is what it says. It says the words of the blessing of Enoch. It's a blessing, first of all, which it might not sound like, because there's so much, things that happen, but it is a blessing.
Because he gives us so much understanding to know what's happening. Wisdom,
exactly. And you get wisdom. Mm-hmm. And it says, wherewith he blessed the elect and righteous who will be living in the day of tribulation. So it's interesting, he's blessing it for another day, it's not for his day, when all the wicked and godless are to be removed, which is a funny statement. It says, we always imagine that it's the righteous, the believers, who will be removed. And it says, when all the wicked and godless to be removed. And he took up the parable and said, Enoch, a righteous man whose eyes were opened by God. It's God who opens our eyes to see these things. He opens and he saw the vision of the Holy One and the angels, which the angels showed me. And from there I heard everything. And from them I, and let me just get to this, understood as I saw them, but not for this, now listen to this, but not for this generation, but for a remote one which is to come. So he was writing it not for his generation, but he was writing it for a generation that was to come. It's our generation. Mm-hmm. The Holy One will come forth from his dwelling. God sees as Natalie was saying, he's a man of war and he sees everything. And the eternal God will tread upon the earth, even on Mount Sinai, and appear from his camp, and appear in the strength of his might from the heaven of heavens. And all shall be smitten with fear, and the watchers shall quake. Who are the watchers? These are the fallen angels that we've been talking about in previous programs. And a great fear and trembling shall seize them unto the ends of the earth. And the high mountains shall be shaken, and the high hills shall be made low, and shall melt like wax before the flame. And the earth shall be wholly rent in sunder. And that's all we have time this week, because there's a lot more, and we'll be going into it in future weeks. Thank you so much for being with us today. We love that you're watching the program. You can always contact us at info@israelfirst.org. Remember to visit the website www.israelfirst.org, and remember, we're the program that looks at the land, the people, and the language.